All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another day or another session in the J Champions Conference. Next up, we have Jonathan Vila. So, Jonathan is a Java champion. He helps run the Barcelona Java Users Group and helps run the JBCN conference and the DevBCN conferences. But he'll introduce himself much more better than I will. So, I'll bring him in. And then, so Jonathan's going to talk about clean code today. Is it really worth it? It's a story of monsters, heroes, and victories. So I love that title. So welcome, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you for coming to the presentation. And I assume that attending all the rest of the amazing talks in Java Champions Conference.
Yes. So here we go. I don't know if I shared this. If not, remember you can watch all of these videos after they'll be on YouTube afterwards. So check out and follow that stream. So without further ado, Jonathan, I'll remove myself and you can take it away.
Thank you very much, Brian. Okay. So let's start trying to impact you with a big number. That it is $2 trillion using short scale. And what is that? Well, it's the cost of poor quality code annually, just only on the United States. That's a huge number, right? But if you are not interested on money, let's talk about time. It's about 4 days per month and developer that it is invested on fixing errors. Now I hope that I have your attention with these two big numbers. And let's talk about if clean code, is it really worth it? And I will try to do it through a story of monsters, heroes, and victories. Hope you enjoy the talk. Well, this is me. I'm Java passion, Java champion, and also community driven. As Brian said, I'm one of the organizers in the Barcelona Java community, also co-founder of JBCN Conf, and now called DevBCN. It's a conference in Barcelona every year. I've been developer for the last 30-ish years using several languages, including Delphi. If you have used Delphi, put it in the chat. I would love to know that there are more people using Delphi. I loved it. And I'm also a developer advocate for Sonar. If you want to know more about me, just simply go and scan this QR. During the presentation, you have below, you have my Twitter handle, and also you have the link to the slides. So if you want to follow the presentation, taking a look to the slides, that's even better. This is the QR for the slides and the agenda. Well, first, we are going to talk about what is poor quality code. So probably we can know what it is clean code. Let's find out. But let's define what is not clean code. The cost of it, I introduced a number, but we can see a bit more about it. Then we will try to define what is clean code, basically. And it's not only a book, there's way more than the book. Which are the most detected issues? I work for Sonar. Sonar provides tools for scanning projects. And we have a lot of information from all the projects that are been using Sonar. And we will dig into the most detected issues in Java projects. I will show some interesting hints that we can follow in order to do clean code. Tooling, because we are not alone trying to follow clean code, or are we? I don't know. Let's find out. And the way. So I don't know if there is anyone here that have followed The Mandalorian. So as our friend Mando said, and his order is always saying, this is the way. I will show you the way of doing clean code. And also I will share some references. that if you want to know more about this, again, if you use the link for the slides, definitely it's going to be helpful for you if you want to know more. So let's start with our monster. This is a monster with 3 heads. Well, it could be 7 heads, could be an hydra, or, well, be anything. But it's, you know, which is our monster. You have it in your head. Okay, but what it is, this monster? Let's try to find out what are the attributes of Porky. This is the name for our monster. Well, Porky has buggy behavior, so probably you can find projects in your experience that are following this approach. Also, put it in the chat if you have been in a project that it is close to Porky. Let's find out. So Porky has a lot of bugs, or several bugs, but it's also messy with high coupling and low cohesion, meaning you have a lot of dependencies between classes. So when you touch something, you're going to impact on other things. And also you have low cohesion, meaning you don't have your classes grouped in a domain. So they are things related to the same domain scattered across the code. This makes the software unmaintainable, because when you are going to touch something, you're going to impact several areas, and you are also going to invest a lot of time when you try to modify something, because it's scattered across the code. So you need to find that. So most likely you are going to miss some of the parts that you need to fix. So it's unmaintainable, and it's also using obsolete libraries, frameworks, meaning old versions. Therefore, you are going to miss performance improvements, you're going to miss bug fixes, and also performance improvements. So definitely, it's also a problem of this project, Porky project. Also, a lot of code repetition, meaning, again, you have the same logic repeated several times. And when you want to abstract, or when you want to modify the way you, for instance, you connect to an external layer or service, if you have several parts of the code doing the connection or doing the negotiation on the first request, if you want to improve that, you are going to touch a lot of parts. So definitely it impacts in the time that you're going to invest in refactoring. But is there anything else about Porky? Yes, there are more things, and it's about security. Because it's also susceptible to have more CVEs, because you are using all versions of the libraries, and also because it's hard to maintain, and that means probably you are missing some parts that are introducing issues. It can be prone to memory leaks and low throughput, again, because you have classes that are doing more work than it's needed, because you have monster classes or monster methods doing too much. Therefore, probably in some requests, you are doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Definitely, that can lead to have low throughput, or a code that it is not super optimized. And also memory leaks, because if you have methods doing a lot of things, or you have code with a lot of dependencies, it can lead to not releasing some resources in some places. It's hard to keep clean code when you have, obviously, the code separated or scattered across the code. It's almost impossible. So you need to fix that. Also, it can lead to non-deterministic results, because you have tests that are checking, well, the behavior of your classes and methods. But if your classes and methods are super complicated, it means that the test can be also super complicated to do. It can lead to have tests that are testing the features, but probably not all the use cases that should be tested because it's super complicated to replicate the way that you want to test. So it can lead to not having all the results that you are expecting. And again, if you have classes that are doing lots of things and the same behavior is shared across different functionalities, let's say, it means that in some requests, probably you are doing things uh, that are not needed, and therefore probably you are going to get uh, results that you are not expecting. It's not clear what every method is doing in the conception of behavior and also in the testing. This leads to not having use cases covered. Again, it's what I explained. Due to the complications of testing, probably you can miss some tests. And it also can lead everything to have a big tech debt because you don't have a good design, you don't have good separation of concerns, good modularization. So it's the iceberg that we all have in mind. But let's talk about what it is the cost of Porky attacks. We know that it is more than 2 trillion the cost of the poor quality code. But it's important also to know that just only on finding and fixing bugs is more than $600 billion. This according to the IT CISC report that you can check here for 2022. But at this point, I assume that you agree with me that the healthier the code is, the less bugs that you're going to have. Therefore, the less money that we are going to invest on fixing them. So I assume that at this point, you all agree with me that we need to go to the green side and have healthy code. If you don't agree, please put it in the chat. I would love to have a conversation about it. So now we know which is our monster, Porky, but we have a hero in this story. And this hero, it's basically you. All the developers are the hero in this story. So, well, we name it clean. And this happy face is for a developer. I don't know if you have this happy face the whole week, but let's assume you have. So this is our hero, and it's you. So you should be represented in the following slides. If not, again, tell me. So what clean, so you, does in a regular day? Well, the ideal world would be to have this developing environment, everybody happy, everybody typing without even looking at the screen. But probably that reality is not that, right? At least not mine. So what a regular developer does is introduce new features. Obviously, we are paid for that. We fix some bugs. Well, we try to accommodate some bugs, fixing bugs in some sprints. We have little time for tech debt fixing. So if we want to clean our old code, we have very little time. If you have enough time or more than enough time, again, put it in the chat. Because I think most of us don't have enough time. But we also study new technologies and we go to meetups and conferences like this one. So this is great. And it's amazing that we have this space of sharing knowledge and sharing network. Definitely go to meetups and conferences because it looks like an advertising, but it changed my life. So it could change yours definitely go to meetups and conferences. But also, we spend a lot of time saying, yeah, you're on mute in doing meetings. And why not? We also rant about old code. But just to the point that we discover that the developer that committed that code was you 1 month ago. It has happened to me, and I assume that to some of you also may have happened. So this is like a regular day for us as developers. And now we need to know where to go, which is the goal for us as developers, which is the nirvana for our hero, Clean. So in this story, Clean decides to do something, to kill Porky. And in the process of, well, I want to kill Porky, but I don't know how to do it. She defines the nirvana in her head and says, okay, the goal that I want to achieve for my software is that it has to be consistent. It has to be adaptable. That means having the right design in order to evolve easily. It has to be intentional because I need to see exactly what the intention of our code is. So it needs to be easy to find what the code is doing. Well, I didn't say the description for consistent because it needs to be formatted using the same conventions across the code. So it's not like using one way in a different part of the code. And finally, it needs to be responsible because we don't want to break copyright laws and other laws with our code. And also, we don't want to reveal private information, also known as hard-coded passwords. Yeah, probably you are thinking, yeah, but who is hard-coding passwords? We will see in a second. And also, it's important too, is not using offensive language in our code. But yeah, I know that. But it's an important point to consider that in this story, our nirvana is also very important. We are not only a piece in the chain of producing software. We are developers. So we need to be confident that the code that we are submitting is good, is clean, it works, and it's well tested, and it follows the description of the nirvana for our software. But also we need to be proud of the code that we commit, not just simply committing code and blah. No. I want to be proud that my code is clean, is good. I want to reduce discussions in the pull request review. And also we need to be skilled. So we want to learn every day the way of doing things better. So it's also important. So these are the three goals for the nirvana for our developer, for our hero. And once Clean has these goals in mind, very clear, she decides to, okay, I need to take action on this. So she goes and joins the Clean Code Warriors order because she has heard that that order is preparing the developers in the right way to kill Porky. And the principles, we already saw them in the goals for the software, are that the code needs to be using the same format and conventions because it needs to be consistent and very identifiable to see what it is doing, adaptable because it needs to evolve easily. So using modules, for instance, it's a good way. Not having repetitions, and obviously well tested, because if it's not well tested, we cannot evolve something that we don't know if it's breaking something. Intentional, because it needs to be clear what it is doing. So logical, I always say that we don't need to over engineer things, and sometimes we are we tend to do those things just because it's cool, just because I want to share that I'm amazing doing these crazy things. But it's important that the goal is to have code that works in the better way possible, and the clearer way possible too. Efficient is also important in order to consider the consumption of resources. Now that we are in the AI trend, definitely resources consumption is something very important to consider. Also, because if you are using public clusters, definitely you are going to pay more for the more resources that you use. And responsibility, I already said, not breaking the law, and also not revealing hard code, passwords, and using the right encryption algorithms, so secure ones, and respectful to not use offensive language. So these are the principles, and Clean joins this order. And after training a bit, she decides to go out there and see, okay, I know I want to kill Porky. I know which are the principles, but is it that Porky is that bad? I've heard that Porky is bad, but yeah, is it worth it for me to go out there and fight Porky? Let's see which is the uh, status in the market, let's say. So these are the most detected issues. And basically, where we find first, it's cognitive complexity about methods. Probably you are familiar with cyclomatic complexity, but we will see in a bit which is the difference. But basically, it's saying functions are having too much complexity in them. Also, there is a lot of unused code that should be removed, like unused variables, unused arguments, methods, functions not used, even empty methods, you name it. There are lots of things not used that should be removed or implemented, their usage. You never know. Also, there is a lot of to do tasks in our code. And just to mention an example, using just taking a look to an Apache project, you can see that there are still to-do elements that have been introduced years ago. And that's not the way. It should be something that it is either removed because it doesn't make any sense, or either implemented before submitting, or just creating the issue in the issue track system in order to implement them. Definitely, the code using to do is not the way to track issues. Flow types in Java, for instance, there's a lot of usage of collections without specifying the type, and then this makes readability way harder. So it's recommended to always use the type of the collection. Generic exceptions, well, some people can argue, or we can have a discussion on this, but basically what it means is instead of using generic exceptions and throwing them, just create more specialized exceptions, or throw specialized exceptions that you can catch above the call, and then you can treat them separately because you know which was the error, with different catches. There's a lot of objects referenced that can be null because they are not checked. So this can lead to null pointer exception. So we can group all these most detected issues basically on complexity, dead code, comments, design, error handling, and null handling. But there's more. There are a lot of projects using passwords that are not secure when trying to connect to a database. So definitely we should use algorithms that are secure enough in order to create passwords. And well, it has to be a secure one. So we have this issue in several systems. Also, parsers suffering from execution in the XML. So we should also avoid to do this. We have also the top 3 is suffering from cross-site scripting. So we need to control the endpoints on that. And surprisingly enough, credentials should not be hard-coded. So we have lots of projects with credentials hard-coded. And definitely this is not the right way. And in some cases, we also have the issue of using elements or values coming from the user that the code is using to find something in the input-output system. So it could be that a malicious user can inject or do path injection attacks. Definitely, this is also something important to consider if you are doing this kind of file system calls. So we can group this into credentials and inject or scripting. So in summary, what we have is a lot of dead code, a lot of complexity, to-do blocks, and less but not nothing, error handling, null handling, and finally vulnerabilities issues. This is the status of the projects out there, considering thousands of projects and millions of issues detected. So Clean decides to train a bit more and receives some hints from her teacher. And those are grouped by, we are going to consider now the vulnerability and security challenges. Probably you have seen like this image before. I don't know if this really works or is it a urban legend, but yes, it's always funny for me. So for instance, credentials should not be hard-coded. It's easy to understand, but sometimes it's not that easy to do. So instead of hard-coding the password, just use external service in order to obtain the credential. With database operations, we can suffer from SQL injection if we are using a string concatenation. So instead of that, use prepare statements, and then you can reduce the vulnerability, definitely with this. This is connected to the image that we saw before. With HTTP redirections, it's also an issue that we detect that in some cases we are using a value coming from the user or coming from the request in order to do redirection. In those cases, we need to sanitize or check against an allowed list of destinations, because if not, you can suffer from redirection attack because the user can send not expected URLs. Also, I totally agree with this one, and I have found in the past, different opinions about this. Definitely, there are some frameworks and libraries that think this is not the case. So instead of using entities directly on our REST endpoints use DTOs. We think in Sonar that this is a good point to follow, and it is also you can check in the OWASP mass assignment cheat sheet document. We should always use DTOs in order to interchange information from the user and the backend, let's say, and then use sanitized versions of those DTOs to incorporate data into the entities. Because if not, we could receive an entity that the user has filled with values in certain fields that we were not expecting. And either we go to use DTOs and using DTOs for every specific request, allowing only the fields that are needed, and then we can have all the information and create the entity that we want without allowing the user to put values in the fields that we don't want. Definitely, this is something that can be discussed, but I think it's an important point. And for that, in the past, I've used Mapstrack, and it works perfectly well. I loved it. I used it with Quarkus, and yeah, it's great following the DTO approach instead of using entities for everything and running away of those entities that are also annotated to create a REST endpoint directly from the entity. Oof. Okay, let's continue with this. So let's talk about bugs and code smells, challenges that we find in projects. If you are a Spring user, well, when Spring starts, it tries to discover the beans, and it starts on the starting package. But for that, we need to either pass this package into the component scan annotation, or the application, the Spring Boot application class needs to be in a specific package, well, in a package, and then Spring will start from that deep into the package tree. But if we use the Spring Boot application in the default package, meaning we don't specify the package, or we pass an empty value to component scan, Spring will try to scan the whole class path, and then someone could put jars into the class path, and also you can suffer from errors because Spring is going to discover its own beans during this process. So this is also important. I assume that most of you are not doing this, but sometimes you can miss, and for that we need tools. This is also an interesting point. When you are using multi-threading and you have synchronized methods, if you use the thread sleep for whatever reason, you are going to block the thread. But instead of that, if you use the wait, you are going to allow that thread to be used for other things, and it will come back after that time. So it's important to have this wait instead of using the sleep. With the printf style format, this is more like an issue that it is hard to detect. So if you are using a string format and you have different arguments, sometimes it's hard, or it can happen that you are putting arguments not in the right position or not using the right type specifier in the string, but it's hard to detect. So definitely we need to use the right type, the right format specifier. But again, this is something that using a tool will help us a lot. Assertions, this is very obvious, but is not that obvious. So obviously, we need to do an assert that, for instance, and then we need a condition. But what happens if we miss the condition? The test will pass. The test is green, but we are not testing anything. So obviously we need always to use conditions, but it's hard sometimes to find that we have missed a condition. The same with tests that are not including assertions. We could have a test that it is not asserting anything. Fine, green. So sometimes, especially if we have big test methods, it can be hard to spot if we are missing an assertion. So we need something that warns us if we missed the assertion in the test. Also, with resources should be closed. And for that, what we need to do is, use the try with resources that will do for auto-closable resources, it will close the resource. So it's important to not do it manually, especially because we can miss this this closing for the resource, and we need to wait for the garbage collector to release the resources. So definitely use try with resources. It's the way to go. But in terms of design and complexity, I said that we were going to talk about cognitive complexity, and you have here the cyclomatic complexity. Left part is code that it is doing the sum of prime numbers, and the right one is just simply a switch case. They have both the same cyclomatic complexity, but for sure you agree with me that it is way more complex to detect what the left part is doing compared to the right part. And for that, we have something called cognitive complexity that takes into consideration the breaks and the indentations. And that way, we have that the left part has a cognitive complexity of 9, and the right part has a cognitive complexity of 1. So definitely now we have a way to see more clearly that one piece of code is really complex or not. And definitely this can help us just to reduce that number if the tool says, hey, complexity too high. Also, we have the dependencies. So in some cases, we are going to have several classes that our class is depending on. And yeah, we all know this, but again, sometimes it's not that easy to spot. So it's important that if we have something that can help us in this task. With the methods, again, the complexity, instead of having super brain methods, super big ones, having smaller ones, that it would be clearer what they are doing, and it would be easier to refactor them and to test them. With public methods, that we should not contain selector arguments, and we should so instead of having one method that it is, in this case, temp, that depending on the one argument, we are deciding which is the branch that we are going to follow. Instead of that, it would be better if we have methods that only have one branch cover. And it's on the call to the method where we decide which method we call. So this is important in order to improve readability. But we also have specific things for specific Java versions. For instance, in Java 12, it's nice to have the switch expression. So instead of having this vertical large method, we have the right part where it's an expression. So we are not going to have intermediate assignments. It's only one assignment, and we can do it way easily without the breaks. So it's way better to understand the right part than the left part. With Java 16, we have the stream to list in order to return unmutable lists. So before that, we needed to use collectors, and using the collectors to list, we are going to get a modifiable list. But if we don't want that, we need to use collectors to unmodifiable list. It's two verbose. So now what we have is the to list directly from the stream, and this will return an unmutable list. If we want, we can also use the collector, and that's it. But if we want unmutable lists, it's better to use this approach. Records, instead of having data classes where we need to implement all the verbosity that it is usually needed, and now we have person that is also final, so immutable, and then it's way better to use the records instead of using classes where we need to specify everything and be sure that we are not being mutable. For Java 19, what we have is a new static method for hash maps, hash sets, for basically hash-based collections, where if we want to create a collection that it is for a certain number of elements with the constructor, the system is not going to create or reserve that memory, but instead it's going to create or do reserves of memory in bunches. So now with the static method, we can be sure that at the moment will be all the space will be reserved. So it's better to use this approach. So in summary, all of this, our hero, so you or Clean in this story, has to do a lot of things, a lot of rules to cover, plus the internal rules in your team. Every time that you code, every time that you are reviewing, every time that you are committing, so constantly. So there's a lot of work in order to follow the clean code approach. But clean is not alone. So there are some weapons that she can use in order to fight Porky. There are static analyzers that will check the code, and they will highlight issues, they will warn you, they will provide description, information, and learning, and they will check for bugs, vulnerabilities, and also security injections or configurations. So they follow the OWASP top 10, top 25. There are several linters or tools that they can provide this information. I've listed here some of them. But the idea of those linters is that while you are coding, you will see your code with a highlight, so warning, something highlighted saying, hey, here you have a problem. And on a panel, you will see all the issues list. And in another panel, you will see a description of those issues. With some tools, I can talk about SonarLint, for instance. You will see why is that an issue, which is the solution that you should apply, links to the documentation that support this issue, and some of the issues even have quick fixes that you can apply directly without even having to modify yourself. So this is a perfect way of learning while you are coding. But there are also other tools that they are continuous integration checks or quality gates. That means, okay, we have a linter in our IDE that will tell me that I'm trying to commit bad code. Okay, so I will fix it, I will submit it, but then the team or the project needs something that really prevents anything to commit into the main branch. And for that, they have these quality gates or CI checks that some tools provide, and in order to prevent something to be merged. In the case of SonarCube or SonarCloud, you have quality gates that you can configure And depending on the values that you configure, it will allow or not allow the merge. Definitely, this is also a great tool. So basically, in order to use these tools, there are three different focuses. One is cleaning as you code. So it's not cleaning is not something that you will do afterwards. It's something that you do while you are coding, seeing the issues in your code with the documentation, with the description, with the help, with the links, with the quick fixes. In that moment, you fix your code. But also learning as you code. You have an issue. You don't only fix the issue, you learn about the issue. Reading why is that an issue, which is the explanation, which are the problems that you can cause with that, how to fix that issue, because you will have different descriptions that can help you in order to fix it, and even just getting more information to not do that issue again. If we only focus on these tools like something that warns me that something is wrong, fix it, move on, we are losing part of the value. So definitely learning as you code is important, and also for team retrospectives, because you have the documentation of the issues that you can bring to the retro and talk about those issues and how they affect the code and how can you just fix them. Or it could be that for some issues you consider that, yeah, it's not an issue for me to have this. Okay, so that's a team decision, and then you can mark the issues as I want to resolve, or this is not an issue. So that's a team decision. But our hero has an unexpected danger in all of this. That it is, sorry, false positives. So basically, false positive is when someone is telling you, "Hey, this is an issue," and you look at it and said, "Ah, that's not an issue, man." And this happens when these tools either they are not mm, as good, or because the complexity of the context is making it very hard to detect that is an issue or not. In order to exemplify this, in this code, we should have an issue here because we are using a string concatenation in the log method, where we should use uh, argument injection. But in reality, we are not using a string concatenation because const value is a static final. So in compilation time, this will be reduced. So therefore, in runtime, we don't have a string concatenation. We have a string with an argument, and we have argument injection. So this is not really an issue, but the linter in this case is not knowing the whole context. But you can mark the issue as this is a false positive, and then the maintainers of the tool probably can take action on that and try to reduce the false positives of the tool. In this case, there is a link in order to know more about false positives and how you can handle them. And now our hero wants to go and kill Porky. And for that, she starts thinking, okay, so which is the path that I need to follow? How can I get to Porky and kill it? So basically, when you use these tools, you will see, in some cases, thousands of issues, lots of issues, especially if you have a long living project. So it's overwhelming, frustrating, and it's like, wow, there are lots of houses burning. So if I want to invest time on fixing them, it's gonna be forever. So let's put our focus on other things. Okay, that's the usual approach, but not the right approach. The right one is focus only on the new code that you are introducing. Only in that code. Do not take a look to the old code. Well, yeah, take a look, but it's like with a different perspective. Focus on the code that you are committing today and be sure that the code that you commit today is clean enough. Why? Because basically, as almost everything in this life, code also dies. So in this case, you can see chart code introduced in 2010, red. Code introduced in the red part, you can see that it was introduced in 2010 and it has been reducing, and in 2022, it's almost unexisting. The same for other parts. 2016, the volume of code introduced in 2016 is way less in 2022. So why putting focus on old code if that code is going to die eventually? So put focus only on new code, and eventually after 4 or 5 years, most of your code is going to be clean, especially in super dynamic projects. If you want to know more about this approach, this comes from a story called Ship of Theseus, where they had a ship that they were removing one part at a time and changing it for a new one, exactly the same one, but a new one. So after a long time, they have the ship with all its parts replaced by new ones, exactly the same ship. And people were starting to discuss if the ship was exactly the same or not. So this is something that happens with code, that it's going to be each part replaced by a new one because you improve, because you use another library, because you no longer do that, because you are introducing new features or new approaches. Is your same project, but the code dies. If you want to know more, these are the links of Ship of Theseus and the the library for code that is Git of Theseus. So we are coming to the end, the presentation. So basically, which should be the outcome of this story? Going out there and killing Porky, or cleaning as you walk and chopping one head at a time, Porky. Basically, the right way of doing this, the way, is cleaning one part at a time. So cleaning as you code instead of trying to fix your whole project, because of the software or code also dies. Conclusions? Well, a summary: not using clean code will have a huge impact on money, time, reputation in the company, but also morale on the team. Developers do not have time to invest on fixing bugs. Well, at least this is my experience, but if you have a different one, tell me. Clean code will impact positively not only on software, but also on developers. This is important to understand, that following clean code is not about following 5 design principles and 5 rules. It's a lot of things involving security, code smells, bugs, and vulnerabilities. If you try to do it on your own, definitely it's going to be hard. So we can leverage on tools helping us from the IDE to the CI/CD. Only a portion of your code will survive along the years. Therefore, you need to focus only on new code. And eventually, you will have your whole project clean. And another conclusion is that AI tools can be a good help in some cases, especially to create the images presentation for the images for this presentation. So if you want to know more, these are the references. If you want to be as our warrior hero that tries to learn new tricks, these are the links for references that have helped me to create the presentation. I need to give thank you to several tools to create the AI generated images. And that's all, folks. This is these are the characters that have been doing this story. Me as the voiceover. We have George, Sporky, Lydia as Clean, and Yipman as the master. So that's all. Thank you very much. Here you have the QRs for the slides. And also, please, 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 to rate me. It will help me a lot. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. I'll leave the QR codes up for a minute while we field a couple questions. We have a few minutes if anyone has questions. I know the couple came in. There's so many things I would like to talk about and dig into, like you touched on a lot of security things. I know I personally have learned a ton from tying the linters and static analysis tools into my IDE that have taught me a lot of things along the way, especially around security related topics. So that's been a big help for me. So I'm glad you touched on that too.
Yeah.
So related to this, let's see, Vincent asks if you have any good resources to learn more about secure coding.
Secure coding. Well, definitely one of the main links that I would follow is, but this is like product placement, but it's free, open source, so you can check it. If you go to rules.sonarsource.com, we have there all the rules. You have security, and for each rule, you will have the documentation and the links to OWASP 10 and OWASP 25 and other resources. So having an overview on all of the rules that are covering security definitely is an important or interesting thing. I think probably no. If I no, you are not saying that. Okay.
It's all right.
No. So I will put that in the.
I put it in the chat, so we'll have a link. And anyone watching in the future, there still should be a link scrolling by on the side.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Vincent actually asked another question. I'm going to try to parse this. So do you consider sonar issues on Lombok that may expose internal stuff as real issues, like malicious code? So I assume the generated code that Lombok is creating, like it'll expose like a mutable list, as I think is what he's getting at. So how serious do you think those issues are?
To be honest, you touched a point that I haven't checked. I don't know. So I haven't checked the rules covering Lombok, but definitely I will do, and I will try to answer if there is a way. Oh, I will add to my presentation. I usually have a slide at the end with all the Q&As that I am receiving in different conferences and presentations. So I will add this question in the list, but definitely I will check. I don't know. I haven't checked the rules for Lombok. Sorry.
Awesome. I have a love-hate relationship with Lombok. I love it for examples. I kind of hate it for everything else, but it's that's a whole other topic.
Well, usually Lombok has been there for a lot of things, but new versions of Java have been like reducing the need for using Lombok. So I'm thinking on getters and setters, for instance. And if we use records we don't have to have that. So for that point, there's a less needed use of Lombok. But yeah, definitely there are others for constructors and so on. But yeah, I have to say that I've worked lately with Quarkus for a long, well, not a long time, but some time. And yeah, I didn't need to use Lombok at all. So yeah, something to think about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so I think we're right about at time. I don't see any other questions, but you have Jonathan's information here. You have the slides. Definitely, please rate him. Getting feedback from giving a presentation is a great way to improve it. I'm sure Jonathan will give this talk again. But yeah, you have his contact information, and I want to thank everybody for joining and watching. And we have a whole bunch more sessions lined up for both today and then again on Monday and Tuesday. So thanks for joining us, and Jonathan, thanks for giving the presentation.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your moderation, Brian. You were amazing. Thank you.
Thanks.